Hey guys, John Paulamy here, Actionable Intelligence. Today is Saturday, August 27th, and this is the weekly market update. As usual, the disclaimer, nothing that you hear or see on this podcast or video is to be taken as investment advice. This is for informational purposes only. I am not a financial advisor. Please do your own due diligence. It's your money. It's your responsibility. Before we get started, I had a bad cold the last couple days. I'm finally getting over it, but if I'm clearing my throat or sound congested, I apologize. It's because of that cold. So we'll do our best here. We wanted to get the video out on Saturday, as usual. Okay, let's get started. So the big news this week was the announcement by the Japanese Prime Minister about basically the nuclear renaissance, if you will, in Japan. They, last month they made an announcement about bringing a couple more reactors on by the winter, but this is basically a game changer. It's basically putting Japan back on a uh, uh, a a path to going back to its nuclear uh, industry growth, if you will, or reinstatement. So the article was behind a paywall, but here's a couple quotes. Japan is entering a new phase in its nuclear energy strategy, with Prime Minister Fumio Kishida ordering Wednesday the development and construction of next generation nuclear power plants. Kishida's government aims to secure electric power in the medium to long term with a plan to restart up to 17 nuclear power plants beginning in the summer of 2023. In July, Kishida announced a plan to increase the number of activated nuclear reactors up to 9 so they can help meet energy demand this coming winter. The plan envisions the midterm use of 10 reactors, with the number increasing to 17 by next summer. So this is tremendous news. This is basically the validation of Rick Rule, who for many years has said that he felt at least that in order for the uranium bull market to really get going, we need to see Japan restart, which basically short-circuited the nuclear uranium industry after Fukushima. So this looks like this is what's happening. This is major news. Obviously, the uranium stocks took off this week on this news, re-energized this is the catalyst I think that many were, or a catalyst that many were looking for, and has finally taken place. So yeah, we feel pretty good about this. A lot of people, especially latecomers to the uranium space, were getting very discouraged. You don't see hardly anything in the uranium Twittersphere anymore. And now, but for us that are patient, us that understood what was happening longer term, in the mid and long term, we knew that this was eventually going to happen. This is going to happen not only in Japan, but many other countries that swore off nuclear because you don't have a choice. You don't have an option. The people in the countries are not going to stand, like I said before, for a lower standard of living. I will get into that in subsequent slides. There's a new article coming out by Mark Mills at the Manhattan Institute, which discusses some of these things and why I think this is going to happen. But this is big news. Again, the uranium bull market's still in effect, and this is a major catalyst. We have the trickle of news about new plants or this, that, and the other, but this is something that really kickstarted things, and I think is going to bring interest back into the market, and not just retail, but I think institutionally, the story now gets even more exciting and gives a line of sight to increased demand growth and price increases, which I think will attract institutional money to the market. So here was Geitzel. He's the CEO of Cameco. He was on BNN this week. He talked about this also. Put a link to the video that he was on. You can watch it. But he basically says, company as busy as it's ever been, signing lots of contracts. Again, he reiterated in this video what he said before, that this is the best uranium market he's seen in his 40-year career. I guess many people could say, well, he's just talking his book. He's the CEO of a uranium company. What do you expect him to say? But it is what it is. The results are showing that. So, or facts on the ground are showing that. So you can either believe it or you don't have to believe it. But uh, this is this is big news with this Japan thing, and their business is increasing. They're signing contracts. As a matter of fact, he said in this interview that Cameco had sent a team to Japan to meet with their customers. So maybe that's an indication of more demand coming from Japan in the future. So here's typical of what we see every week or so, every other week. This little trickle of news, positive news. South Korea wins $2.25 billion order to build nuclear power plants in Egypt. They're going to be acting as a subcontractor for the Russian export arm of Rosatom, which is kind of interesting in the fact that I thought that Russia was under sanctions, but we won't get into that. But anyways, build to help the Korea Hydro and Nuclear Power is going to help build 4 plants in Egypt. So 4 plants here, 2 plants there, another plant over there, and before you know it, like I said before, the demand continues to increase, and it's going to continue to increase because in a world of energy security, the energy return on energy invested in nuclear is so high that if you turn your back on it, then you are condemning your energy policy to being unable to provide low cost, reliable power to your grid, which we're seeing in Europe currently, and it's not working out very well. So I thought this was interesting. I wanted to throw this in here. Obviously, it'll be a little controversial. People will see things how they want to see them. I did see an article about this. It showed a picture of Emmanuel Macron, who is the Prime Minister of France. He made this comment this week where he proclaims the end of abundance. People need to get themselves ready for the lack of abundance in Europe, tighten their belts, because we have to sacrifice to defend freedom in Ukraine. Okay, well, I guess you can make that argument. Some people believe that they should do that. That's what this whole thing's about. Other people believe that other things are afoot. I'm not going to get into that, but I think what's interesting is this comment that comes in the rest of the tweet, which is what I agree with. The desperation is palpable as the realization that the West is imploding is irrefutable, even to delusional Western governments. So we must blame Russia, and then you will forgive us. So they've got themselves in this jackpot. They being the Western governments, they went forward with these policies to sanction Russia. Ostensibly, the idea was to cause economic damage to Russia, therefore causing the people in Russia to rise up and overthrow the Russian government. And then that would lead to, I don't know what they thought would happen after that Russia would get carved up or whatever. I don't know what their plan was. Or government would be put in place in Russia that was more amenable to the liberal Western order. But we can see now that that didn't happen. It's not going to happen. And so the political class in Europe now has went so far down this road that, it's like when I'm driving back to my house in South Texas. You have to drive across the King and Kennedy ranches. So you leave like the Corpus Christi metro area, and there's like one highway that goes down to what we call the Rio Grande Valley. It's 2 lanes each way. And there's like one gas station there. Then right after that, there's a rest stop that the state has, and there's a sign right before that that says next service station 60 miles. And so that's what's happened here, right? We've ran our gas. We didn't take into the account the fact that there's no plan B. And so when the Europeans decided to sanction, which I thought was an emotional response to the Russian invasion of Ukraine, Maybe they didn't take into account, I don't know, I wasn't there, but it seems like they thought this would work. And they didn't take into account the contingency that there was a percentage, there wasn't a 0% chance that wasn't going to work. There was a chance. So there's no game theory. It's just this will work because we thought of it and it must work because we feel that this is wrong. And whatever they were, it didn't work. As a matter of fact, the Russian economy did not implode. Matter of fact, the current account deficit or surplus is at record highs in Russia, primarily because of their energy exports, which they have pivoted quite easily to other markets. And the only people suffering are the people in Europe. And so now we're going to put forth this thing that you have to endure. You have to endure this uh, sacrifices to defend freedom because the Ukrainians are fighting for all of us. Well, that's not exactly how I look at it. And I don't think that the populations in Europe are the same type of populations of the Great Generation that were willing to endure, or the people in the West that were able to endure the sacrifices of, like, the people in World War II, that generation, the greatest generation. It was a different type of people that weren't weak. And I just don't see that happening. And so this is what it is. It's like deflect from our poor decision making onto this boogeyman, this caricature we've created of called Vladimir Putin, which, is stupid because there's a whole Russian government and bureaucracy around Mr. Putin. He's not just like this one guy that sits there and makes all the decisions for the Russian Federation all the time. Yes, he is the leader, but it's like saying, George W. Bush was solely responsible for, the invasion of Iraq and all these things. It's kind of, it's not well thought out. It's lazy thinking. There's a whole class of people around that. So regardless, they could, people, I think in some polls, even like in Germany, I saw a poll where more than 50% still blame Mr. Putin for all of this. I think that will go away as we see more deprivation take hold. Maybe the Europeans will become, lucky and we won't have a cold winter. Maybe they'll find enough other supplies to, they are finding a lot of supply of LNG because they're paying record prices for it, which is playing havoc with a lot of developing countries like Pakistan that can't compete for these cargoes. And so, the developing world's suffering. And so who do you think, a lot of these southern countries and eastern countries are going to align with when they see what's happening? Hey, we can't get enough energy here because Europe is paying record high prices for this energy and pulling it into Europe, and it's affecting us. So there's a lot of dynamics here, and trying to blame it on a cartoon character called Vladimir Putin isn't really going to work in my view. At some point, the political class in Europe is going to be held accountable. They're the ones that push these policies. They're the ones that fumbled the energy policy in Europe. They're the ones that put these sanctions in place. And we've already seen governments fall, and more governments are going to fall. Okay. So we will see, but I agree with this. It is desperation at this point. And so we will see if my bet is that most people don't want to endure deprivation when it's so easily fixed. It's not like we ran out of energy on the earth and we just have to accept this. This is self-inflicted. And people are going to realize that when they're sitting there with no job, with food costs high, and with energy costs high. What is this going to go on forever? What's the plan? You're not going to make it 2 or 3 or 4 years to build all these LNG facilities and redo the world's energy flows. The political class won't make it that far because people just won't put up with it. You may initially be able to deflect, but there's nothing that the peasants can do to Vladimir Putin. They certainly can do something to these governments that they live under. Well, as long as they still have democratic elections. And so one of the things the governments are going to do is provide more stimulus, more stimmies, right? We created the problem, the European governments, by not thinking through our energy policy and then wedding it to Russia and then putting sanctions on Russia, which backfired and boomeranged on us. And so what we're going to do now is, because energy prices are out through the roof, and we know that you don't like that as the electorate, as the constituents that vote for us, we're going to subsidize your energy use. So the problem is created by the politicians. We said this many, many times. The problem is created by the political class. It backfires. It doesn't go well. And then they create another policy to ostensibly fix the previous policy that bad policy that they created. And so you just go down this road of more nonsense on top of more nonsense. And so what needs to happen, I've said before, is they need to find an off-ramp, get a deal with Russia, and get the energy turned back on. But you know what? We're so far down this now, and the attitude in Russia has changed with all the hate that's been generated from Europe. I think if you when Ukraine finally does have a peace put on it by Russia, that's what's going to happen. There's not going to be a negotiated peace. Eventually, this will end. The Russians will impose conditions on the Ukrainians, and then I don't think the Russians are going to be open to just going back to business as usual with Europe, because I think they realized over the years, as they've tried to reach out to Europe, if they've tried to integrate with Europe, that Europe doesn't want to integrate them. And now you see the full-blown racism and hate from Europe towards Russia that's been there, an undercurrent for many, many years, in my opinion. And just look at the statements, banning travel for Russian citizens. What did the citizens of Russia do? You say, the Europeans say to their populations, the political class, that Russia is a dictatorship written by Vladimir Putin. So why are the Russian people going to be held to account? They can't go to chess matches. We're going to ban athletes. No more travel to the EU. This kind of stuff. But if it, so what exactly, is the plan here? So regardless, getting off track here, but this thing's been botched. Okay, it's been bungled. It's been bollocksed. Okay, by the political class in Europe. They don't know what to do. Okay, and they're not, as Alexander Mercurius at the Duran says, these people have no off-ramp. These people have no reverse gear. So they're not going to back down and say, you know what, we were wrong. Let's have a rapprochement. Let's get a peace deal. Let's stop the killing. Okay, let's stop the war. They're not going to do that. Okay, because that's admitting that they were wrong. And the political class in every country, not just Europe, never admits it was wrong. Okay, because that means the end of your political career. And as I've said before, that politicians are not concerned with, making policies because they want to help their constituents. They're making policies to stay in power and to, appease those who keep them in power, which is the money class. I mean, this is my view. And so this is what we're going to see, more stimmy. So demand doesn't, the higher prices get subsidized by the government. And so there's no incentive to lower demand. You see what I'm saying? This is the problem. This is not deflationary. So I saw this chart. I wanted to throw it up here. This is the S&P. The yellow chart is the S&P during the 2008, basically 2006 to 2008 great financial crisis. And this white line is the current iteration of the S&P. And it's just staggering to me how closely it's following the previous that bear market. What I think is interesting is that we had this little echo rebound here recently over the last couple of months. A lot of people thought that the Fed was pivoting, or at least going to a neutral stance based on Jay Powell's comments after the last Fed meeting. And now you saw what happened yesterday at the Jackson Hole speech, where he basically said, we're gonna keep raising rates. We're gonna, saying that they're going to do something. You got to be careful listening to what these people say. Just look at what they do. We know that when push comes to shove, they will, at least they, did in 2008, they reversed course very quickly. If you remember the pivot, the Jay Powell pivot. I don't know if you remember that. But anyways, it's interesting that this echo rebound here, where a lot of people were getting bullish again, saying the bear market was over, has run right into the Fed comments, which indicate, at least from what they say, that they're going to continue raising rates because, the mindset, the perception now is changing from a pause to back to Jay Powell wants to be Paul Volcker and crush inflation. We'll see. Again, I will state emphatically again what my view is that the Fed will continue raising rates until something breaks and forces them to cut rates and reliquefy. Now, recall that the QT operations are supposed to begin in earnest to the tune of $94 billion a month, I think, in quantitative tightening. We'll see if that happens. They were supposed to already start, I think, at a lower rate, and it didn't really indicate like the balance sheet was shrinking to that point. But we'll see. Again, we want to look at what they actually do, not what they say. And they say a lot of stuff, right? So right now they're still playing the Paul Volcker, we're going to crush inflation, yada yada yada. So we'll see. Again, the economic indicators are showing that we're in recession. I suspect that the recession will get worse as liquidity tightens, and at some point something will break sufficient to force the Fed to reverse course. So we'll wait and see. But I just thought this was uncanny how closely this resembled 2008. So that means that, we will be looking at you saw what happened on Friday. It looks like their summer rally is over as it ran right into the brick wall of the, hawkish Fed statements. So this is important. I'm a big fan of Mark Mills at the Manhattan Institute. Every time I mention his name or mention the Manhattan Institute, there's a cohort of people that come on and comment that the Manhattan Institute is a right-wing think tank, and so they discount what has said. I don't do that. I look at what's being proposed and the argument being made by the person, and then I try to refute that argument, regardless if they are, right-wing, left-wing, whatever. It doesn't matter. I want to know is the argument logical and factual based. If you're going to make your investment decisions and your investments in life based on a political viewpoint that you have, solely on that, and discount other arguments, I think you're going to have a hard time in life, because things are not, necessarily, people aren't wrong all the time. There's several people on the left that I listen to that I have common ground with. I am vehemently anti-war. I am not for this U.S. hegemonic policies that we have around the world. I've never been for that. And many people on the left feel the same way. So I have common ground with them. I am very, very against this entrenched, ingrained political class that seems to do nothing but get into power, say the things necessary to get into power, and then do absolutely nothing for the people, or try to solve any problems. There's many on the left that feel the same way. So there is common ground. Do I have fundamental differences with economic policy and social policy with many on the left? Yes. But that doesn't mean where we can find common ground that we shouldn't do that. And so just shutting off the other side seems ridiculous to me. So anyway, that's what happens a lot when you mention Mark Mills or the Manhattan Institute. But regardless, I love his white papers that were on the Manhattan Institute. If you are interested in understanding why this energy transition will not work, he's written a couple papers basically around this that are already on the Manhattan Institute webpage, specifically around how the lack of materials, the lack of the ability to get the sufficient materials to do what the political class is trying to do with this net zero push and all this. It doesn't matter what you want to happen. Reality is not going to allow you to do it. So this is like a follow-on information. Now, I get a lot of these articles from subscribing to a mailing list from the Global Warming Policy Institute, I think it's called, in the UK. That doesn't mean that they're, pushing a global warming agenda. They actually are showing articles of why it doesn't. They're refuting a lot of the stuff. So this is where this came from. So I don't have a link to the article, but supposedly another white paper of his is coming out, and this is some information from that. So that was a little long-winded, but anyways, why the energy transition will fail. This is from Mills. One can begin with a reality that cannot be blinked away. Energy is needed for everything that is fabricated, grown, operated, or moved. Digital devices and hardware, the most complex products ever produced at scale, require on average about 1,000 times more energy to fabricate, pound for pound, than the products that dominated the 20th century. He gives an example. It takes nearly as much energy to make one smartphone as it does one refrigerator, even though the latter weighs 1,000 times more. So energy inputs, we've talked about this before, right? It's right up here. Everything that is fabricated, grown, operated, or moved, requires energy. And as we've gotten more complex, the energy inputs are higher for the products, even though the products are smaller. That's amazing that it takes 1,000 times more energy pound for pound to make a smartphone than a refrigerator. This is just tremendous information. The world produces nearly 10 times more smartphones a year than refrigerators. Thus, the global fabrication of smartphones now uses 15% as much energy as does the entire automotive industry, even though a car weighs 10,000 times more than a smartphone. The global cloud, society's newest and biggest infrastructure, uses twice as much electricity as the entire nation of Japan. That's amazing. So the inference here, or what you need to understand, is as society becomes more complex, the energy inputs increase. And so we're running into a dichotomy here where we have Western political class telling us that our energy use needs to go down. Macron says that we need to come into this, the era of abundance is over. And yet how many people that are in support of this political class or are indifferent to it understand energy inputs? This is the problem. See, most people don't understand these facts, and so they just take it for granted, right? Because who would be against? Who would be against sustainability? Who would be against net carbon zero, net zero carbon? Why are you against that? And then, as they're typing away on their smartphone to get their pictures that are kept in the cloud. I mean, people just don't know these things. It's that simple. Advocates of a carbon-free world underestimate not only how much energy the world already uses, but how much more energy the world yet will demand. In America, there are nearly as many vehicles as people, while in most of the world, fewer than 1 in 20 people have a car. More than 80% of the population has yet to take a single airplane flight. And so I would suggest to you that if you live in a developing country, you want your life to improve. You see what people in the West have, you dream of these things, you dream of a better life. And we're talking about, in many countries, like in sub-Saharan Africa, we're talking about clean water, guys. We're talking about proper sanitation, basic infrastructure that hasn't even begun to be built yet. Forget about the cloud or a smartphone. We're talking about the basics, okay, that every human would like to have. And then you talk about some of these luxuries as people move up the ladder of prosperity. They're going to want a vehicle. They're going to want air conditioning. They're going to want to go on trips. Okay. And so energy use is going to increase over time, not decrease. And so the view that, or the idea that with increasing energy use or demand, that you're going to accommodate that with less dense sources of energy, the ideas don't mesh. This is the problem. People are confused. So I suggest to you what will happen, possibly, which you can look forward to, is a decrease in energy usage in the West forced upon you by government, while in the East, in the developing world, it will increase. So your standard of living will go down and other people's will go up. That's what will happen. And so if I was young, I would be looking to emigrate to countries that have a rational view on this, because it's obvious to me that these people in the West, in the OECD countries, they're going to charge this hill whether you like it or not. And so you can either, many people believe in it. Okay. And, I saw a video yesterday, it was going around Twitter, this Extinction Rebellion outfit. They had their little vests on that were made from petroleum products. And they went to a gas station in the UK, and they had these hammers, mallets, and they had like punches, and they would go up to the gas pump and destroy the display for the gas pumps. And the guy was like from India that I guess maybe owned it or worked. He goes, "What are you doing? Stop this!" And no one's arresting them. No one's doing anything. This is the West, and these people. This has a certain constituency where people actually believe they're sitting there. It's funny. The safety glasses they were wearing were made from plastic. Where do they think the plastic comes from? I mean, these people. I don't even want to. I don't even want to like bag on them anymore because it's like it's too easy. But we cannot. This is why we don't let children make policy because the 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 thing about energy, the thing about industrial policy, the thing about life in general is it's a trade-off. You have to make trade-offs in life. If you choose to pursue your interests, that may lead you to a life that you have a lower pay. Maybe you're doing something, making wood carvings, and you enjoy doing that, but people don't want to buy them. You may be happy and fulfilled, but there's a trade-off that your economics will be lower. It's the same thing. If you want to constrict energy supply, then you're going to have a lower standard of living. And so there's trade-offs. If you want to have a higher standard of living, then you're going to have more energy inputs, and then you're going to have to somehow deal with the consequences and the externalities of that. And they can be dealt with, and they are manageable, and things can be done in a manner that allows for economic growth, that allows for a high standard of living, and yet preserves the environment. But these radical things that we're trying to do in the West, all they're going to do is allow more energy to be consumed in the East. And so your standard of living will go down and theirs will go up. That's all. It's not hard to figure out. Civilization still depends on hydrocarbons for 84% of all energy, a mere 2 percentage points lower than 2 decades ago. Solar and wind technologies today supply barely 5% of global energy. Electric vehicles still offset less than 0.5% of world oil demand. So with all the electrical vehicles on the road, it's offset 500,000 barrels out of the 100 million barrels of daily demand. So I don't know. And we spent, like some say, somewhere in the neighborhood of $5 trillion already. So you can believe what you want, but make sure that your facts are correct and that you're willing to pay the price. And I don't think that the price has been communicated fully to the voters in the West, because if people actually understood what net zero means, what sustainability means, at least from the perspective of the people pushing these policies, they would be aghast and they would not be in favor of them. So lives will be put at risk. This is another article from the UK, I think the Independent. The government has been warned that lives will be put at risk unless it takes urgent action. The scale of the squeeze Britain's face on their incomes has been laid bare, with the energy price cap confirmed to increase average bills by more than 80% in October, and forecasts predicting annual costs of £7,000 by April. So the inference I get from this, and I don't know, maybe anybody that's in the UK can bring us up to speed, but it sounds like there's currently a price cap, but the price cap is going to get readjusted in October, and it's going to increase energy prices by 80%. So we'll see what people think about that. Probably not. They won't be too excited about it, especially if they're told it's for democracy in Ukraine and freedom and sustainability and net zero. I don't think people are going to like it. Boris Johnson finally acknowledged on Friday that his successor as prime minister would plainly have to offer more cash. Again, more stimmies, more band-aids for bad policy. While the chancellor, Nadhim Zahawi, told people to cut down on their energy consumption to reduce their bills and insisted he was working, quote, flat out, unquote, to develop support measures. The one thing that you don't hear is a rapprochement and peace in Ukraine and a rapprochement with Russia to get the gas turned back on. You don't hear that. Just going to give more stimulus. Again, these people have no reverse gear. They're not going to admit they were wrong. I've said this many times, and I'll say it again. This isn't going to change until the people actually literally go in, grab these people by the nape of the neck and their trousers and throw them out of these institutions and put sensible people back in there. Do I see that happening? No. I mean, Boris is out, and what? Who's going to go in next? Liz Truss? She's no different than Boris. There's no change there. This is another person that is part of the establishment. Okay, and this isn't going to change a darn thing. Same thing here in the United States. You're going to have this congressional election. Yes, there'll be some people that are, anti-establishment, but they're not of sufficient number to change anything. You're still going to have Mitch McConnell in the Senate. You have to get rid of this person. Okay. And what exactly do the Republicans stand for? They're going to botch this midterm. This is my prediction. It looks like they're going to botch this. They have no policy. The policy of just sitting back and not saying anything, and not fighting against what the Democrats are doing. Okay. And sitting here and just saying, well, the red wave will just happen on its own. You have to put forward a plan that people want to vote for. Okay. And just saying, well, Biden's so unpopular that, we'll get a red wave. Typically in these elections where there's no presidential election, yes, the party out of power typically gains seats, but again, these people are not interested in changing anything. They are two wings of the same bird, two sides of the same coin. They're all part of the establishment. Okay, they don't care, because it's a grift for them. This Liz Cheney got thrown out, and the thing that fascinated me was that nobody asked her was, I have a question for you, Congressman Cheney. When you came into the Congress, you had a net worth of I forget what her net worth was, like a couple $1,000,000 or something like that. And it's 36 million now. So how did that happen? So what are these people mostly concerned with? And it's not just, it's all of them. It's basically, yeah, there's a few people here and there that, are kind of eccentrics that, but for the most part, you get into that atmosphere and absolute power corrupts. Absolutely. It's the same in the UK. It's the same in Europe. So the peasants are going to have to go in. There's going to have to be literally a revolution. I'm not calling for revolution. That's literally how you get real change. It's not going to happen by just, well, we'll go to the polls and we'll elect so and so, and then they'll, do what we want to do. And that's not how things work. That's kind of naive. So here's more of that, what we're just talking about. Trillions spent and fossil fuel use will increase. After spending hundreds of billions of dollars on wind and solar, 82.3% of global consumption of primary energy is still fossil fuel, and it is going up in 2022. So you see right here, you can't see I had to cut it off to get this on here, but your renewables here is this 6.7%. And so you see oil, natural gas, coal's actually growing. I put a link to an article from the Wood Mackenzie coal analyst on the website. It was an interesting discussion. Coal as a fuel source is actually growing in the world now, specifically where in the developing world. And why? We've talked about this before. Because of it's easy to use, it's plentiful, it's easy to store, move, these type of things. So yeah, I mean, doing more of what hasn't worked isn't going to fix the problem. I think there needs to be a big push for nuclear energy when we talk about primary usage of for electricity, but that's just part of the overall energy mix. And so you're not going to fly jet. We've been through this before. I don't even want to go down the road. So it's not going to work. It's not working, and now people are feeling the repercussions of it. And we'll see if the pain is sufficient to change people's views. I'm not convinced it is. I hope it is, but I'm not convinced it is. So this was beautiful. These big universities have these endowments, right? They're billions of dollars, and it's like they're almost run like hedge funds. And I thought this was interesting. It says oil and gas investment to make University of Texas system endowment the largest among universities. This is hilarious. The University of Texas at Austin, just a couple of hours up the road from our headquarters. This was Frank Holmes, his weekly Frank Talk, which I'll put a link to. You should subscribe to. It's very good information he puts out every week. May soon unseat Harvard as the wealthiest school in the U.S. How has it managed to do this? In a word, oil. At a time when I have to laugh. At a time when large sovereign wealth funds are divesting from fossil fuels and ESG investing has gone mainstream, the University of Texas system has been the longtime owner and manager of 2.1 million acres of mineral-rich land scattered across West Texas that it leases out to as many as 250 producers, including ConocoPhillips. Thanks to higher oil prices, the mineral rights to the land generate roughly $6 million per day to the UT system, according to Bloomberg. So I don't know. We'll see if they get infected with the endowment board of directors divest themselves, but I think people like money, and if you have $6 million a day coming in, that's what is that? Roughly two billion a year. We'll see. But I think it's hilarious. It's kind of you know, this is another thing, like, the general investor and the institutions have not come back to energy investing or energy companies, even though they are outperforming the general stock market. And I'm going to show you a couple charts now of what's going on. I think that's going to happen eventually, but it's going to take some time. So here's oil and gas producers set to report highest ever cash flows of 1.4 trillion, highest cash flows ever for oil and gas. And so you can see the previous years going back to at least 2010. Again, this was off the Frank Talks website. And you can see, the various areas of the world, but suffice to say, this is a big increase. And what are they doing with this cash flow, right? They're not reinvesting it fully, because why would you? We've been down that road before. We've talked about that before. And so debt paybacks and return to shareholders. And so what are we seeing? We're seeing energy stocks starting to outperform relative to broader equity market. Okay. We're seeing that. Why? That's what happens when you have this kind of cash flow. And so what I wanted to show here also was, you have these decade-long periods of outperformance, relative outperformance, that go in these long decade type situations. We talked about it last week. I've talked about it in an email out to the free email list. Why? Because these commodity cycles are so long, because the investment cycles and the length of them is a big reason why. And I think, we're starting to see this outperformance. And I would suggest to you, I have suggested that this decade, at least the decade, will be one of outperformance for energy. And we're just getting started. At some point, and there's going to be volatility. There's going to be, times where it levels out, or you have pullbacks or whatever. It's not a straight line, but you see, if you have a long-term mindset, you can see what's going to happen here, or what I think is going to happen. So here's some more bad news. More fertilizer plant shutdowns. Poland's top chemicals company stopped making some key fertilizer products because of record natural gas prices. As we've said before, natural gas is the primary feedstock for the production of urea and ammonia. These are components of fertilizers, nitrogen-based fertilizers. And so as the price of gas and the availability of gas prices went up and availabilities went down, it's forcing these companies to shut down. So European gas rallied to all-time high this week, triggering demand destruction across the region. Now fertilizer supply at risk. I wanted to show this chart. Soaring gas prices hit Europe. Fertilizers, chemicals. This is hard to see on this. I will put a link to the tweet. You can expand the chart and see all of these chemical plants and fertilizer plants all over Europe that are shut down, and the millions of tons of fertilizer production that has went into layup. This is not good, folks. So these fertilizer plants exist for a certain reason, right? Because there is a demand for the products that these plants make. And so if they're shut down because of the lack of availability of the feedstock, the demand for the products doesn't go away. So of course this gives a advantage to places like in the US that are able to produce these things at a reasonable cost, but it's insufficient supply for the entire world. This is what we've talked about. And so this is going to have an effect. This is part of the, I guess, what Macron was talking about. Get used to, deprivation, because if you don't have sufficient inputs, our corporate, large scale, industrial scale farming that we've got used to. This is another thing we've wedded ourselves to. That's allowed the population of the world to get to 8 billion people. And if you take these fertilizer plants offline, I don't see how you get the necessary inputs into the soil to produce the sufficient food, basically your row crop, grain crops, soybeans, corn, wheat, to feed the world. So this, to my mind, is going to have an effect on food prices at some point. So I guess get used to the deprivation. I don't know. So anyways, want to get back to this. Again, another positive for the energy stocks, energy sector. Dividend yield by S&P sector. Energy is currently the highest. And we can expect that to stay that way, at least unless energy prices collapse. I guess I'm not going to play economist and say, we're going to have a worldwide depression and things are going to collapse. I guess that's possible. It's not a 0% chance it would happen. But I think that if you read the current Goring and Rosenzweig Q2 commodity review, which they do paper every quarter, it's about 45 pages. They talk about times in history, other times in history where, because supply was constricted because lack of investment, and one of the times was actually during the Great Depression in the US, where commodities actually increased in price because, as we've talked about before, the supply was constricted. And so even though you would think in your mind that, well, if the economy goes down, commodity prices go down, they point out, now they don't say that's going to be the case this time, but they do point out that there have been historical points in the past, and not just once, but several times, where even though the economy has contracted, and you would think, well, that would force down commodity prices because demand would go down, because supply was so constricted, the prices didn't decline like people thought, and in some cases actually went up. So they suggest that we may be in one of those times now. And so you see, like, all these economies around the world that are in recession, Europe, the US, China, and yet Brent is still at $100 a barrel. Natural gas prices in the US are over $9 an MCF. So something's happening here. I mean, I thought copper was going to decline more than it has. I think it's $3.70 a pound. That's still fairly high. And I see things, news coming out this week that there's going to be further declines in production in Chile. Okay. And so unless you're really keeping up with these things, you get into this mindset where this first order thinking, well, economy goes down, therefore demand for commodities goes down, therefore price declines. That is one thing that can happen and has happened. And another thing that can happen and may be happening is that, again, supply is decreasing faster than demand, and prices may not decline as much as people think. So we'll see. We'll see how far that this recession goes. We'll see if we actually, if people blink and reverse course and start reliquefying. I noticed that China came up with another stimulus plan this week. I think it's like over $2 trillion now in stimulus that's been announced. I don't know if it's in effect. It'll take time to actually do that. There was also a video I saw of them destroying more recently built buildings. I know that people think that the demise of China has been predicted many times. I think it's, has a lot of problems, but it's such a large country. It's 1.4 billion people. There's so many things going on. It's hard for me to just say, eventually I'm sure that they're going to have a problem, but is that going to be this year? Because it's been predicted for the last 5 years. So we'll see. But energy, like we've said before, is the basis of our modern life, and restricting it is just going to cause costs to go up. So There's been a lot of benefit towards the energy sector. You saw from the chart I showed with the cash flows, and then you see, higher payouts to shareholders. It's just how it is. All right, that's it for this week, guys. Appreciate you watching. Thank you for your time here. I hope this was useful to you. Again, feel free to engage in the comments in a constructive manner. And like I said, there was a guy last week. He didn't come with the receipts, and if you're not going to come with the receipts, you're going to be held to account. We're going to come at you. Don't if you make an assertion or if you make a point, then when you're challenged on it, you have to respond. So keep that in mind in the comments. And again, appreciate the corrections that were made or the clarifications that were needed. Sometimes I make a statement, I'm speaking extemporaneously here. So sometimes I don't get all the facts or I don't have any notes. I'm just going based on a general outline I have in my mind. And sometimes that leads to mistakes or lack of facts or clarifications that are needed. So feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to do that in the comments, in emails, whatever. All right, guys, that's it for this week. We'll talk to you next week. Thanks.